Okay, no, music's over. Hi, everyone. It's Kristi here with my May patron hangout. This month I have Matthew and Tom. We were having a bit of a chat about, ended up being a bit of a serious subject, but one that I think probably needs to, can be talked about more within like the atheist YouTube content creation area, and that is how atheists deal with death. Because it's an inevitable part of life, and it's obviously something that has a lot of religious connotations to it, and for people who were once religious and left religion, making that adjustment to the inevitability of our own mortality it's a big, I think, intellectual, moral, and emotional step for many people.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought we'd contribute to the conversation by having a little chat about how atheists deal with death. And Matthew has very kindly agreed to kind of step up and talk about his personal experience, where he was, where he is now.
Well, my personal experience is that I went from, I think I mentioned this in the last video we did, is I went from theism to atheism. I went from basically fundamentalist Christianity now, and then over the last several years have completely stripped that away. So having grown up the way I did, there was always that idea that there either is heaven or there's some form of resurrection in the future. So it was always this idea that what we see around us right now isn't all there is. That death really, if you were a good person, if you followed what God said, death really wasn't the end of everything. So at least when I was making that transition, it was very difficult. Death still is, for me, one of the most difficult topics for me to even think about, let alone discuss. Because suddenly you realize this is it. You've got to make the best of what we have right now because there's no promise for anything in the future. So I'm still working through my emotions on that, working on the emotions of my own mortality, working on the emotions of the mortality of others. Something I recently did, at the recommendation of Steve, was I watched the movie A Night to Remember, and I've always been big in Titanic lore, at least until the James Cameron film came out.
Okay.
And this is the first time I watched one of these movies since my transition, and I found it emotionally very difficult because of this idea that you had hundreds of people facing their own extinction, and realizing that there were, 100 years ago, these hundreds of people who eventually got the idea, oh, we're not going to make it. And that is heavy, I think. Just, that oh shit moment when you realize that, okay, I got to be fine with everything because there's no more with this. So it's difficult, but it's like it kind of forces you to live in the best way you can because you know that this is it, that, you get your 50 to 80 years, depending on how strong you are, what cards you're dealt. And, hopefully it makes you live a better life simply because you want to see good come out of your life, and you know that there's some finality to this.
Yeah, thanks for that. Tom, how about you?
Yeah.
That was, by the way, I just want to. Sorry, I asked you to talk, and then I'm going to talk over you. Matthew, that was really beautiful and elegant, and I understood and empathized with a lot of the things that you said there. So thanks for that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, Tom. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. It's your show. I was an Episcopalian for my whole life, and until, well, I identified with that until a few years ago, and then slowly kind of, drifted out of that, thinking of that as my identity. And Episcopalians are a little, we're not fundamentalists. Most of us, some of us are, but most of us aren't. Gordon Klingenschmidt is an Episcopalian, so we can go batshit. But most of us are a little bit mushy about the whole afterlife business. we look to religion, or I'll talk about myself. I look to religion for comfort, and thinking, well, the person who's gone is now in a better place. I didn't wish hell on anybody, and after I guess it was after 9/11, I went to a church in Minneapolis that had where the priest was talking about the deaths in the World Trade Center, and she was talking about both sides, about the terrorists who flew the planes into the building and the people who died in the buildings, and her way of looking at it, priest, her.
Mm-hmm.
We got
Episcopalians.
Yeah, we got those, or they got those, I guess now.
Mm-hmm.
And her idea was, at the end of time, there would be a great gathering, like a huge banquet, and the terrorists and the victims of the terrorists would be in one place, and they would understand each other and have compassion one for the other, and there wouldn't be the recriminations or anything. There wouldn't be like a hell or anything. It would be perfect understanding, and that spoke to me. That really felt good to me. But the more I go into atheism, the more I think, well, that's a very pleasant fantasy, but hell is, the rest of the Christian church pretty much has got this heaven and hell business going on. And hell is not such a nice place, and one of the pleasures of heaven is looking down and feeling superior to those who are burning in hell, enjoying the torments of the damned. I never understood that, but that's kind of the other side of that. In atheism, I have a different view of that now, because I understand that the life we have is limited, and it's not going to last forever. As much as William Lane Craig or anybody else wants to have their eternity, they got to have that eternity, or life is not worth living. That seems to me to be limited and naive and really bullshit. I don't understand that anymore. But there is a piece of me yet. I mentioned to you earlier, I've had several deaths in the family in the last month, and a year or two ago, I would have felt not compelled, maybe impelled, to offer a prayer or to wish that they were in heaven or something like that. And I find now I don't have that anymore. It's more that I appreciate the lives that were lived, and treasure the memories, and understand that that's going to happen to me too. That people will treasure or not. There are people that won't treasure my memory, but the people that I care about will treasure my memory, and for a while that'll go on, and then it's over. And a billion years from now, nobody will have any idea, if there are people, nobody will have any idea we were even here. And that is, to me now, very comforting. I don't have to invent something to make my life worthwhile. Mm-hmm. It's worthwhile the way it is.
Yeah.
Okay, that's blathering for a while.
Yep.
I have another personal thing. I have a problem with depression, and so death, especially when you have a series of deaths, really kind of knocks me back. I don't feel horribly depressed or anything like that. It's more just like a lack of energy and almost an apathy.
Yeah.
And I don't feel energy to do anything. It's just like, oh God, another one.
Yeah, I think, when there's an accident, people go into physical shock. And I think that there's, it's possible to have a bit of that kind of emotional shock
Yeah,
where you just like the world feels out of kilter and it feels wrong, or you just feel out of step with it. And yeah, it just feels suddenly life becomes a burden, a much heavier burden than it
yeah,
was before.
yeah.
That sort of dislocation that death imposes on us. And then, of course, if you've got, as you had, more than one, I do think that they add exponentially. The grief isn't just magnified. It's not 1 + 1. It's suddenly 10 times
Yeah,
more, and then for each
yeah,
one. Mm-hmm.
yeah. One thing I did want to mention, a little oddly, the death that happened yesterday. My former mother-in-law. Um, she was surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and probably great-grandchildren, and they're very religious. But what they did as she was, in her final moments or hours, I guess, they read Kipling's The Jungle Book to her. Instead of sitting around doing prayers and bewailing or false comfort, they were reading The Jungle Book. She was a teacher. She had and her and my ex-wife is an English teacher, so they have they instead of trying to get comfort from religion at that moment, although I'm sure there was some of that going on. Mm-hmm. What they were doing in her presence was being with her in a way that was honoring her life and meaningful to all of them. And I thought that was for a religious family, that was probably the best atheist death that I can imagine. She lived a good life. She was out of it for the last few years, and but she did hang on until her until my son's sister was able to get there from Florida. So she hung on until Miriam, this girl, came. Mm-hmm. And she was, I think, the one reading at the time she passed away. So I mean, I think it was deeply meaningful and not at all religious.
Yeah, a good death.
Yeah.
I think it's what we all wish for at the end. I know I certainly, my preference is to be unconscious. That's my obvious preference. But I think, and my grandmother decided to go off of dialysis because she was just exhausted. She had a heart problem, and the medication for her heart was going to hurt her kidneys, and the stuff that they were going to give her kidneys would have, hurt her heart, made it, less reliable. And they said, okay, so we're going to put you on the heart medication and start you on dialysis. And she was in her 70s at this point, and she's sort of, no, this is no kind of life. Yeah. And it took 2 weeks between making that decision and her passing, but she got to say goodbye to all her grandkids and all her remaining relatives, and she did just sort of not, again, I mean, there was some discomfort and she had some panic attacks, but despite all that, she never said, put me on dialysis. And then she just got sleepier and sleepier and sleepier, and there were other symptoms too, but then she did slip into unconsciousness and then slipped away. And so my admiration for her is just unbounded.
Yeah.
So, I guess if you're done, Tom, I'll do the quick, have the what happened, the story about my comportment toward death. So growing up Catholic, we obviously, hell was a big part of the story. And when I came to leave Christianity, hell was the one thing that was still very much conditioned from my childhood that was making me hesitate to walk out the door. Mm-hmm. Even though intellectually I knew it was morally unfounded and cruel, and that even if there was a God that existed, there was a hell, I wouldn't want to worship him anyway. And then from there, because I wasn't quite taking the step out of the supernatural entirely, I went into Buddhism for about 5 years. And Buddhism is obviously very different, because in Western cultures you have the idea of a soul, which seems to be a part of you, but also separate from you, and then the idea of heaven, which is a sort of location, right? Like Jesus said, my Father's house has many rooms, as if there's a physical, like presence. And obviously what the idea of heaven is changed between early Jewish theology and then apocalyptic Jewish theology and then into Christianity. So this evolution away from the body in a kingdom on earth has become a resurrected special body in a kingdom in a different location. But of course with Buddhism, the whole premise is that our lives are built up watching things as if they exist from their own side, when, like Kant would say, we spend a lot of time imposing structures on our lives, and we label things as good and bad, and we like good things and we don't like bad things. So we spend a lot of our time trying to get near things that we think will make us happy, and being angry at or avoiding things that are bad. But a lot of this is just preference, or even misunderstanding that we've learned. And that when you start to understand that everything is emptiness, here's I think a good way of describing it. What I think Buddhists would say about the way that even our bodies exist, which is the composition of our conscious minds, our brain activity, our bodies, our emotions, everything else. If you think about when you're going along a road and there's a thunderstorm, but the clouds part and the sun comes in and you see a rainbow. You see the colors of the rainbow in the sky, but if you were to go up to that rainbow, it would be composed of light and air and water drops. Right, so you would pass almost through it. But as you step back from it, its component parts appear to be a solid form, and that is what I liked. That's how I thought of the I, the sense of ego. When I say, I feel happy right now, that's actually like the illusion of the rainbow, which is really just a composite of a lot of other things that are temporary and not me. So there was a lot of time I spent, in meditation and thinking about the concept of emptiness. And to detach from the ego and to try to see things a bit more from that perspective. The other important element in this story is the Buddhist attitude toward death. Buddha said that death is my greatest teacher, and that's because if you remain mindful of death on a daily basis, then you live your life in the light of death. And I think from my personal experience is a little bit, I still carry that with me. I probably think about death and dying every day and my mortality every day. But in a lot of ways it puts shit in perspective in a big way. The other thing that you do is, well, within the Mahayana tradition, the Kadampa Buddhism I practiced, and I'm sure other traditions do this too, but we would do meditations on death. And you would do a little mental scenario where you play out in your head that you're on your deathbed and your family is around you and they're all crying because they're going to lose you and the doctors say it's hopeless. And then it's just you and your mortality. And how do you want to face that moment? And what they teach, from a Buddhist perspective, is, well, you got to kind of go with it. So, just keep your mind, try to keep your mind calm, try to keep your body calm, try to realize that it's they compare falling asleep to dying, and this practice of you can practice dying every night by falling asleep. And I can't do that because I can't stay awake and fall asleep at the same time. I can't meditate and fall asleep at the same time. But I think the idea of it is that slowly letting go of the world around you and slipping into sleep. That it's that letting go part. Of when the day wants to kind of keep you on and you're starting to drift, and then suddenly you get brought back into it. You're like, no, I was almost asleep there. But there is that, at least I don't remember it, but there is this moment where I just sort of from my conscious mind just untether from the external world, and then I'm gone for 8 hours. And I wake up the next day and I know that I've been unconscious and that I've slept and time has passed, but I'm right back into it. So I think from a personal standpoint, that practice of doing that thing, the first thing you do is obviously you shit your pants, because if you do your meditation on death well enough, you actually start to feel like the adrenaline rush of what it would be like if I, and was facing that moment. But after 5 years of practicing, right now, if I'm on a plane and the turbulence gets really bad, I'm just like, keep breathing. Because what else am I going to do at that point? I don't want to go down screaming. I'd rather be very zen about it and just be aware of myself, and then hopefully it'll all be over very quickly. But so from my side of it, actually facing death through that meditation process, which is just basically like a mental rehearsal, so that it's not so scary when you think about it. And then, of course, when it comes up, at least I'll have a plan. Is the idea. And then
that sounds amazing to me, because I think one of the scariest things for me is that idea, like I said, that time differential between the oh shit I'm dying and the actual death. Like that could be anywhere from seconds to years.
Yeah.
And that's the part that really scares me. And it sounds like they have a way, or you have a way of dealing with that inevitability.
Yes, and I do think that a lot of people would benefit from learning more about that, because it has nothing to do with the supernatural, and there are not a lot of religions that teach you how to die, and Buddhism does.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to other people, like my family members, I think it's when something like that happens now, I really disassociate what's remaining from the person who remains within me, and the idea of the memory of that person being separate from. So it's you have to, that letting go of the idea that they're still out there and they're watching over us. From the description of heaven, it sounds boring as fuck. I mean, seriously, like, I would not want to spend an eternity singing the praises, or even an eternity of everything. If it's an eternity of eating ice cream, I would get bored. If it was an eternity of watching supernova, I would get bored. Eventually, you've just done everything, and it would seem like eternal life would actually be a curse.
Yeah.
I love George Carlin's statement on that, the fact that what do you do once you get there? Like, do you help your family? And then once your family comes up there, what do you do after that? So I can understand that apprehension.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my idea of heaven was to get a perfectly equipped spaceship with some friends and go everywhere and and look at everything, from the smallest quantum foam to the largest galactic walls, just everything, and learn everything there was to know about it. And if you've got eternity, you can do that. The problem is that after you've done all that, you still have eternity.
Yes, yeah.
It's like, well, let's do it again. And the only thing I can think of is that the only thing I could think of to deal with that was that I'd have a brain wipe and start all over again. But after
the eternal
a while,
sunshine of the spotless mind.
Yeah, and I wonder after a while if maybe sometimes the brain wipe wouldn't work perfectly, and I would remember, God, I've done this before, and in eternity. Eternity is just long.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think heaven and hell would be the same thing after 15 or 20 quadrillion years, and you still have eternity to go. It's an incoherent concept.
Yeah. But I'm with Matthew on this whole thing. Like, I wouldn't want to go. Yeah, the eternity just sounds like another form of torture. It just depends on which side of it you're on. And I'm definitely with Matthew that it's not so much like the finding out that I'm going to die. If I get some sort of diagnosis that I'm really worried about, or even when I die, what's going to happen afterwards. It's that actual going through that process of going from life to non-life. That's what. Yeah, I think that's the one thing. I don't know that you cannot not be afraid of that, unless you've got a plan. You've got an illness and you know how things are going to proceed, and you've taken some steps or whatever to kind of manage those.
Yes, I've always said that death, the actual being dead, doesn't scare me.
Yeah.
It's the transition that scares me.
Yeah, Woody Allen said, I think I mentioned this before, Woody Allen said, death doesn't bother me. I just don't want to be there when it happens.
Yes, yeah, that's it, pretty much. Yes, yeah.
And speaking of immortality, for the viewers who like classic Doctor Who, there's always that statement that Rassilon said, immortality is a curse, not a blessing.
Yeah.
Yep.
For the Whovians out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think we've kind of done the rounds, and I don't know if people. I guess the other thing too is just on the side of mourning, the best funerals that I've been to were not the ones in the Catholic Church with the rites and the songs and the hymns and the readings. There was the services where they told stories that had people laughing, that involved the decedent, and had people rolling in the aisles and having tears come to their eyes when they're laughing, because they're celebrating the life of the person, not
Right.
kind of using the death as another way to worship their God.
Right.
That reminds me, a friend of mine died probably about a year and a half ago, and it took them about 6 months to arrange the funeral, if you want to call it that. Obviously, they did graveside services and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But she was so beloved by her friends, by her coworkers and stuff like that. We ended up renting a local theater to have
Wow.
her funeral. And we had hundreds of people come to the stage and relate their stories. And literally, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, not because it was sad, but there wasn't a dry eye in the house because everyone laughed their asses off the entire night. Yeah, it was a sad occasion. Everyone misses her greatly, but it was still amazing when you look at a life lived rather than a life that ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say really quickly that you guys probably heard stories involving her that you didn't know before, and now you have.
Absolutely. I only knew her because I'm a theater guy and we worked together backstage. So I never heard the work stories. I never heard the family stories. I never heard all these other things. So it was very interesting seeing the life well-rounded.
Yeah. Interesting you mentioned theater. I went to church with a family that was very interested in the theater, very involved. And we have in my hometown. There's this beautiful, massive, heavy stone building that has just a jewel box of a Gilded Age theater. It's gorgeous, and it had gone really downhill for a few decades. And there was the city wanted to raise it for a parking lot, and there was these people in my church, especially the mother of the family, was very into the theater, and they started a campaign to save the place, and now it's saved, it's restored, it's gorgeous, it's one of the top 15 most beautiful theaters in the world, in my little town. And when she passed away, they had her memorial service in the theater, and it was packed, and there were, people were singing her songs and telling her stories. I wrote a poem for her that also involves some laughter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a good, I don't know, the death was not good.
Yeah.
But her memorial service was really healing and joyful.
That is, I think it's a very positive way to deal with the living, because obviously the person who's dead you don't have to worry about them. It's about the healing process for everybody left behind. And another thing on this is also, I think I deal with death more in a more honest way, because I don't have trite phrases that I can just trot out.
Right.
I can't just say he's with the angels now, or he's God's got him up in heaven, or something like that. He's sitting next to Jesus at the dinner table, or something.
Yeah. Or it was God's plan for him to go.
Yes.
I hate that.
And instead I end up saying things like, I'm holding you in my heart, or
Mm-hmm.
this is so unfair and my heart breaks for you. I'm more honest about what I'm feeling for that person than hiding behind the stock phrases.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a topic for a completely different discussion, but yeah, that's one of the most difficult things about being atheist is trying to provide comfort for your theist friends. That the only thing you can do is be there and listen.
Right.
And I actually think, I think this is perfectly on topic for this. One of the things that I do think, well, at least I think this is what I would want if and when, some bereavement is inevitably going to come to me, is I don't want people to talk, when Job was suffering and his friends just came and sat next to him in silence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sitting Shiva is still, people do that. Yeah, you don't need to say anything. Sometimes you just need to be there. And actually being there and not saying anything is just about perfect, because they don't want to be on their own, but they don't want to have to entertain you.
Yeah.
You're just being there, like doing that person a solid and sitting there with them in their grief. I actually think that, that's actually would, at least for me, I think would be very helpful.
Yeah.
As opposed to bringing over tuna casserole, which, tuna casserole is fine and nice. But that time spent just being there for the person, I think would be valuable.
Yeah. I've also liked the idea of an Irish wake. Not necessarily the getting drunk, although that would be all right too, but having the person in the room, the dead person in the room, and having and this is, I guess, what we talked about before, having people tell stories about their life, maybe sing songs, just remember them. And I guess the idea of a wake also sort of fulfills the ritual component. You get people together, you know what's going on. It's a comforting, if this is part of your culture, it's a comforting thing to have this ritual going on, and it's a send-off. I thought for a long time that's what I would like to have in my if I had a choice about what was going to happen after I go.
You want a bit of a send-off with everyone, making the appearance and telling their stories, including the embarrassing ones.
Yeah.
That you would have blushed through, but you're like, yeah, that happened.
Yeah. And I guess that kind of ties. That's kind of an example of the things we've been talking about, of remembering the life and being of comfort and even joy to the people who are left behind.
Yeah, I think sometimes, especially with family, they're close to people, but they don't always know the extent to which they have had an impact on other people's lives. And so meeting people at the funeral and hearing those other stories and hearing that other side of that person, like we talked about before, really opens up things about them that you never know, and your understanding of them becomes richer, and you have more memories of them in that way by sharing.
Right.
So, ooh, heavy topic. I think there was one other thing I was going to say, which was having to do with afterwards, and it's not that, again, religions, trite phrases, but also religions have in so many ways permeated human ritual, and I fall on the side of ritual being really important, whether it's going to your graduation ceremony and putting on the ground and walking across the stage and getting your diploma, or saying the words in front of your friends and family, or having that goodbye, that send off, that those markers and those processes kind of like help us know what to do and kind of ease those processes, and also we can look forward, like to the graduation ceremony. It becomes something that you understand is a passing through, and so I think that it's good that increasingly atheists in the States, and of course atheists around the world, are going to maintaining rituals but reinventing them for themselves and for what they need, you know, for the purposes of processing their grief and remembering their loved one, rather than it, just being, you know, sometimes I think people a little bit with religion throw the baby out with the bathwater, but this is a case where I do think there's a lot of human meaning in rituals that we can separate out from religious practices and meanings and take them back.
Yeah, I'm kind of. Go ahead.
Well, I was just about to say, I think sometimes our makeup, you know, however we evolved, especially emotionally, kind of makes those rituals a necessity. Because I know I never really felt much for ritual at all, period, even when I was a theist. Then now that I'm an atheist, I have less use for ritual, so to speak. But I think one of the most helpful things I've done recently is I have a group of friends that celebrate Dia de los Muertos. So basically, they don't celebrate Halloween; they celebrate this instead, and it's an extremely emotional experience to go through that, especially if you have a room full of a dozen people who are talking about the ones they've recently lost, and what they were like and things. So, you know, getting back to that idea of awake, or, you know, description of the person. But it's an extremely cathartic experience, you know, helps you work through the emotions of that loss. So, you know, I realize intellectually that there is a need for these rituals because they help us get through our day-to-day lives.
Yeah. I was thinking about this in terms of that movement. I guess some in the States and some in Britain for atheist church. And I've always been of two minds about that, because I understand on the one hand the ritual aspect of it, but why would you call it church?
Yeah.
It's not. You know, we got to find other ways to put this stuff. You know, Dawkins has been part of, and I think maybe even conducted one or two atheist funerals. And I think you can do it without invoking, you know, religious. I think you can do rituals without invoking religion or religious symbols or terms.
Yeah, I think. You want to go ahead, Matthew, and then I'll.
Well, I was thinking that sometimes, especially with some atheists, there's almost a comedy aspect to it. Particularly, like an example would be Penn Sunday School, where, you know, it has nothing to do with church whatsoever, but he's an atheist and he likes to talk, and he takes the structure that people. How should I describe this? Have a warm feeling for. You know, I can imagine that if you spent 2, 3, 4 decades going to church every Sunday, sometimes every night during the week or 2 nights during the week or whatever, that you've got this ingrained ritual in you, and at some point you need an outlet for that. And in our current society, church seems to be one of the few institutions left where we have this fellowship and gathering. We don't have so much the fraternal organizations anymore. So really it's like your coworkers, some friends you may see, and your church. Maybe I'm missing something, but that's what we have as far as this need to associate with other people.
I understand it as a model, but I don't. I kind of resist the idea of. It seems too simple and too derivative to just go with church or the idea of, you know, gathering in fellowship and using the church terms. I think we're smart enough to figure out. I want to say a better way of putting it, but I'm not sure that's right either.
I think there's also some media. The media might be in their headlines calling it atheist church when, you know, local groups are calling it like a fellowship meeting or something along those lines.
Or a Sunday gathering.
Yeah, I would think I would call it the Sunday alternative. If I were to go back to the States, you know, I think I would like hire out a hall, call it the Sunday alternative, and put on lectures about science, or maybe like screen Cosmos, and play Tim Minchin songs, and, you know, I would basically just Yeah, use it as an opportunity to geek out and show people that you can walk away from the Sunday alternative having learned something,
Yep.
new.
Fuck the motherfucker. Fuck the motherfucker.
Yeah.
And, well, I think the only issue is, again, you said the media is people grasp linguistically for the word that has the most meaning or conjures
Right.
up the that conjures up the image that you want to portray, and since so many people are religious, it's easy to pull the religious word out, and it's
Right.
like if you want to use another word or if you want to come up with your own vernacular, you're going to have to teach people that.
Right.
So there's going to be a learning curve here, and maybe as society moves towards secularism, that'll occur naturally. The evolution of this, but as of today, we still kind of have to use the loan words from the theists at the moment to get through our daily discussions.
Yeah, I understand that, and I agree. That is a transitional thing. That's probably what we're going to have to do. But I resist still, to some extent, the idea, that whole idea, because of the related issue that religious people keep talking about atheists as religious. The atheists have it's the atheist religion, and it's really not. I think maybe backing up and saying, well, we can look at ourselves as humanists and talk in those terms rather than as atheists doing this. Say humanists doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think this is a kind of uniquely American thing, where, in terms of the culture, where there are a lot of people, I think probably in North America, not just in the U.S., but I'm Americentric because I'm thinking about my home country at this point, that people want fellowship and people want to meet like-minded people, and also they might have come out of a religious tradition and enjoyed the doing the good works, like doing some charity stuff or organizing for special times of the year, to like when it's going to be winter time and coats for the homeless or something. And I think that there is within American atheism, sort of like the old school, more atheists who are like cats. And they're absolutely fine on their own, and like they don't really like if they meet another cat, they might, it's fine, but they're not going to like make an effort to get all the cats together and sway their tails and do happy clappy stuff. And I think that, and a lot of that, of course, is just bound up, and that's what religion does, like Tom was saying. And then on the other hand, there are people who, in order to be fulfilled atheists, they need that connection, and I think that change has happened, in the last sort of 10 years, in the rise of these fellowships, or whatever they're called, because the number of people who are now secular in the States are growing. And so we're diversifying the kinds of people who are identifying as atheists, and that then brings up these, new voices and new concerns and new desires, and other people, saying that, can we do it? Can we just not do it like the churches do? Can we be our own thing, or whatever else? But I think there's a little bit of a growing pains, and also that idea of, in some ways, of trying to reject religion by not being it, by sort of defining yourselves as, you're saying, Tom, about how people try to call it a religion, and that way, if we don't have fellowship, then that's one less thing they can use against us, which I can see the point of. I also know they're going to use it against you anyway, so you might as well do what makes your community happy. But yeah,
I'm not objecting at all to the idea of fellowship and community, and
and I don't want to impute that on you. I don't want to impute that on you. We're talking about other people that don't like that. But yes, go ahead. Not you.
Okay. Yeah.
But there is that tinge. There is that taint.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about the growing pains. I think I don't know how you feel about this atheism plus business. That I don't know if it's still going on, but it certainly went on for a while a few years ago, where folks were P.Z. Myers and such were trying to add things to atheism, sort of append them, like modules on the space station. This is atheism too, and I was never very comfortable with that, because it seemed like it didn't deal with the cats.
Yeah, right.
It didn't do anything for the cats
Yeah, yeah.
because
I don't think it was
the,
meant for the cats.
no, but it sort of I
It
think
pissed them off.
yes it did, and I think it sort of unnecessarily pissed them off, unnecessarily diluted the atheist diluted atheism. Um, I'm open to change about that, but I think atheism is its thing, and people get to decide who they are that way. And then the rest of the stuff is this accretion, maybe secularism or humanism or some other. Anyway, I'm getting vague now. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
I'll jump in and then Matthew if you want to. But so I wasn't around. I wasn't an out atheist, and I wasn't involved in the YouTube community when atheism plus was a thing. But speaking from at least my perspective, my atheism is necessarily intersectional in that, as a woman, I have a lot of my atheism is in reaction to the way that I was taught to think about myself as a woman in my religious traditions, and also the role that women are assigned, the subordinate role, and the basically sexual role that women are assigned in monotheism. And therefore, my rejection of God is very much tied to discrediting that being as a source of morality because of the horrific view of women presented in what are supposedly holy texts. And then also, so there's the feminism side. So that's the most powerful one, really. Being a woman and being a feminist is very much part of why I am an atheist, and it's why I'm so focused on trying to identify the dangers of biblical patriarchy. Now that's obviously my location, because I'm a white woman who was raised Catholic. So I think that a lot of this, again, is like where you stand depends on where you sit. And for guys who are in the mainstream, guys who are in the major groups, the older white straight guys who don't have those kind of intersections in their conflicts with religion, atheism plus probably doesn't seem necessary because you didn't have to overcome personally homophobia driven by religious hate as part of your journey away from God. So I think, again, I don't want to organize a big parade about it, but my atheism is as much about tied into my American values of secularism and separation of state as it is about the equal dignity of men and women, as it is about the mental cancer that is patriarchy in the way that it infiltrates various parts of our society, not just religious communities, but into the political, into the social, like the transgendered issue, into the economic. So yeah, it's hard for me to compartmentalize my atheism from the rest of who I am. But again, that's just me.
Yeah.
What about you, Matthew? Any thoughts on either side? Or
Not really, not on this topic. Sorry, you just took me by surprise. I apologize.
that's okay. I don't know, Tom. I don't want to cut you off, Matthew, but if you have a reaction to that, Tom, too.
Well, reaction to what you were saying, yeah. I am not fluent in the ideas, the theories of intersectionality, but what I know about it seems very, very attractive from the point of view of what I was talking about. You don't have to identify one thing as an agglomeration of a lot of other things that are. This is what it is. This is atheism, and atheism includes this, that, and the other. You have a group of atheists. And many of them have intersections with feminist theory, and then you have others that have intersections with transgenderism or LGBT or social justice in other ways. But you don't have to. You can say I'm this and this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to say this. I'm this one thing that has to include all this other stuff as well. Now, I may be totally misunderstanding intersectionality, but that's to me that seems like a decent theory for organizing my thinking on this. That I don't have to have a church, an atheist church. I can have atheism and fellowship gatherings and concerns about bathroom bills.
Yeah, I think
to
that's
get
it too.
to get maybe to another thing that you want to talk about. But yeah, I'm thinking about stuff. So
That's fair enough.
again, I'm not getting into. I'm not making a lot of sense to myself now. But this is very stimulating. I'm enjoying this.
One of the things that we have in statistical analysis is called an interaction effect. When we do a regression, and a regression is an attempt to isolate the exact amount of change in the dependent variable for a one-unit change in the independent variable. So let's say that we've got the likelihood to vote, which is my go-to example, so I don't have to come up with original ones. And we know that for every year you get older, the probability of you voting goes up by, let's made up number, 0.72. So, you know, it is in terms of like if you were to put it in a model, everyone has a base amount of like a 50% chance to vote. Then for every year older you get, you multiply that times 0.7. So if, you know, I'm not going to do math in public because I'm bad at it, but you would add that value. And then let's say women are more likely to vote by a little bit, so you would add that value. So you add up all of these contributions to basically get an individual score for everybody's likelihood to vote. But you know, sometimes there are interaction effects between variables. So let's say there's an interaction between age and sex such that older women are more likely to vote than older men. For some reason, older men, let's just say in this crazy world, stop caring, right? So the way that we can isolate the effect of or to measure that precise effect of being an older woman is we multiply age by sex to get a specific coefficient just for women who are older, and then we add that to the model on top of their normal score. So this idea that, you know, your age and your ethnicity, your income, your educational level, all of these things are added up in these, you know, these statistical models to get a better score. And sometimes to get even more precise, we have to do these interaction effects. So for me, intersectionality as a concept has always made sense because in statistics we understand that sometimes it's not just enough to have age and sex, you have to have the interaction between the two to see the real pattern that is getting covered up by everybody in the aggregate, you know. And so I think that's really what it comes down to. And you're right, you can be motivated to take up an atheist critique of religious patriarchy because of its take on trans people and the way that it dismisses them. Or you can do it from an LGBT rights point of view, or from the view of the rights of children, or the rights of women, or the rights of you know, non-Jews or non-Christians, and the stranger, all these people. There's a lot of ways that you could enter into a religious critique to undermine the authority that religious people try to hold over us by countering it with secularism. And I think that for, you know, women like me who really resented all of the things that were imposed on us by religion, that having an opportunity to be specifically feminist and in your face to the church is really therapeutic, and it's really important for us. And it's also hopefully for women who are feeling the same things but can't give words to it, to hear our words and hear women speaking those words against the church. And then also, you know, LGBT people and atheists from, you know, from black atheists in the community, Hispanic atheists, and what it's like to leave a Catholic Hispanic family and dealing with that kind of stuff. So the more that those individual voices are out there bringing their own critique, you know, I think it is a matter of kind of bashing away at the wall and from a lot of different directions. I think the issue comes a little bit with maybe, you know, this isn't the way it's always been done, or people are using atheists, the concept, in a way that some people aren't used to. And I personally, you know, sometimes people have good ideas and some people have stupid ideas. And I'm not responsible for every stupid idea every feminist has come up with. I'm also not taking credit for every great idea that feminists have come up with. And I think it's the same thing with atheists. You know, they're going to get atheists out there who are going to have some weird opinions on the left and the right, and up and down. And some people are just going to be weirdos. But the main thing is, you know, if we can find more common ground and spend more time attacking our own religious, whatever it is, our what is like a, not bogeyman, but the kind of thing that annoys us, our religious pet peeve, then we're all going to be working on it from different directions, and they're not going to be able to take all of us on at one time. So it'll all come crashing down faster.
I like
my
the theory. I like the theory. I like your plan. When do we start?
Yes, immediately.
Start yesterday.
Yeah, and do we get uniforms?
I was thinking about doing an ironic T-shirt that and it won't work here, but it would be like if patriarchy is the answer, you're asking the right questions, the social justice brigade. Just because I can imagine all the people that T-shirt would piss off. But no, that's my separate T-shirt thing. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'd have to come up with something. Whether with jackhammers and like under destruction, like religious arguments under destruction. Maybe with like a man and a woman with hard hats in a figure form with jackhammers. Via some dodgy books.
But of course, that means, Kristi, that you're persecuting the Christians now.
Oh yes, with my valid arguments, I am persecuting them with my valid arguments.
Tisk.
I know we're so mean, asking them to think for themselves and question. But for some people, that's actually really hard. I don't want to make light of that because religious indoctrination is a huge issue. And I'm actually going to have a video I'm working on now about Christian modesty and how messed up it is.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow, you could take that so many different directions. I'm amazed.
I'll do a shout out because I'm going to feature the video, but it's is it Deadhead Lego Animations, and he's got something about Christians being angry with modesty. What I'll do is I'll put a link in the video. I'll put the description box below because we didn't cover anything in the news that we were going to, so that's I guess on the table for next month. But this the guy who does this channel and another person who works on the show, it's kind of a cross between Mystery Science Theater 3000 and what else did I say it was, and the Bible Reloaded, because they're making fun of this Christian guy, but they're making fun of him kind of like in an MST3K way. And yeah, I'll link that in there. If you're looking for YouTube content, he's awesome. Check him out. I didn't prep to do the research to remember his name correctly, the channel name correctly, so now I feel like a bit of a heel. But anyway, shout out. Yeah.
That's what post-production is for.
Yes, exactly. That's why I do the stuff off air and then clean it up. I'm not going to clean it up. I'm not going to put any more work in that other than like an annotation and a card. That's it. So, hey guys, that was an hour.
That was an interesting detour from what our original plan was.
Yeah, we did nothing that we planned. We did nothing I planned. I think I really enjoyed the conversation. I thought it was really organic and went places that was really interesting, and I enjoyed it. I don't know how you guys were. You seem to enjoy it all right, too.
I enjoyed it, and I'm glad Tom was here to help.
I'm thank you for this Sunday service.
Yes.
that helped me through my time of trial.
Yeah, this is your Sunday alternative.
Yeah, this is Atheist Church. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, this is for what it's worth. This has been very helpful to me, and I appreciate you guys going along with me on this and talking about it.
I think sharing the stories from our own experiences is one. It's good for us to learn where other people are, and also to hear other opinions, because again, this isn't something that gets brought up a lot, and it's not like there's an atheist handbook with a chapter on dealing with death, or anything like that. A lot of us, when we start down this path that ends up in atheism, we're just stumbling along in the dark. And I think a lot of us are reinventing the wheel, so to hear other people go through the same thing means we're a little less alone, I think. Well,
that was my experience today.
Yes, good. Well then, if you guys are all right wrapping it up there, I mean, we could start the news thing, but it feels like the tone would just not really work, and I feel like we've really come to a place of peace and calmness and kind of work through a lot of kind of heavy things, but in a positive way that hopefully will, kind of end on some closure and some peace. And I guess that's what we need as human beings, is closure, and then the peace that comes after it.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So, well, maybe, I mean, I'll leave these on for next time, or maybe I'll do another episode. But yeah, so planning went nothing according to plan, but I still think it was a darn good conversation. I'm sure people in the comments too will have some positive things to say. So thank you both very much. Don't go anywhere, because after we stop the broadcast, we'll have a little chat and I can talk to you about next month's Hangout and your schedules. But for everybody else who is watching this, thank you so much for your time and attention. If you have things that you want to, mention in the comments, please go ahead and drop those below. And all that's left to be said is that Matthew's been awesome, Tom's been awesome, you've been awesome, and I've been Kristi. All right, guys, we'll
And you've
see
been
you.
awesome.
Ah, thanks. And to the viewers, I will see you guys soon. Bye-bye.